The galactic community had one rule when it came to the Vresh: stay away from their young. The Vresh were apex predators from a death world where even the plants could kill, where gravity crushed bones and atmospheric pressure could rupture organs. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, covered in midnight black fur with silver streaks, possessing retractable claws that could slice through reinforced steel and jaws powerful enough to crush spaceship hull plating. Captain Marcus Webb had heard the warnings. Everyone in the Terran Expeditionary Fleet had. The Vresh were allies, yes, but distant ones. Professional. Cold. They respected humans for their adaptability and strange resilience, but that respect came with boundaries that should never be crossed. Which made his current situation particularly problematic. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway of his quarters aboard the human vessel Endeavour, staring at the scene before him. 2 Vresh cubs, each roughly the size of a full-grown wolf, were curled up on his chest as he had apparently fallen asleep at his desk. Their tiny claws, still needle-sharp despite their youth, were kneading gently against his uniform. Soft purring sounds emanated from their throats, a noise that seemed impossibly gentle for creatures bred to hunt prey 3 times their size. The door behind him hissed open, and Marcus heard the sharp intake of breath that could only mean one thing: he'd been discovered. He turned his head slowly, careful not to disturb the sleeping cubs, and found himself staring into the yellow predatory eyes of Ambassador Krelenik, the Vresh diplomatic envoy. For a moment, neither spoke. The ambassador's fur stood on end, his pupils dilated to pinpoints. His claws extended involuntarily, scraping against the metal doorframe with a sound like knives on glass. Behind him, 3 more Vresh security personnel crowded into view, their expressions cycling rapidly between relief, confusion, and what Marcus could only interpret as absolute horror. "Ambassador," Marcus whispered, keeping his voice low and calm despite his racing heart. "I can explain." "Explain." Krelenik's voice was a barely controlled growl, his translator implant struggling to process the mixture of emotions bleeding through. "You have my children on your chest. My cubs. Do you understand what you've done, human?" Marcus did understand, actually. The cubs had wandered into his quarters about 2 hours ago while he'd been reviewing supply manifests. He'd been surprised, certainly, but they'd seemed frightened, chittering in distress. Their translator callers identified them as Krelenik's offspring, lost in the human section of the station during a diplomatic exchange. What was he supposed to do? They were children. Scared children, regardless of species. So he'd done what felt natural. He'd spoken softly to them, offered them water, and let them explore his quarters while he worked. Apparently, at some point, exhaustion had claimed him, and the cubs had decided his chest made an acceptable sleeping spot. "Sir," Marcus began carefully, "they were frightened when they arrived. I couldn't just." Silence. Krelenik raised one massive hand, and Marcus braced himself for violence. Instead, the ambassador turned to his security detail and spoke in rapid, growling Vresh. The guard's expressions shifted from alarm to something that looked oddly like awe. Krelenik turned back to Marcus, and something had changed in his posture. The aggressive stance had melted into something more contemplative, almost confused. "Human Marcus Webb, do you know why we keep our young separated from other species?" "Because they're precious to you," Marcus replied immediately. "And because most species would see them as threats, even as children." "Partially correct." Krelenik moved closer, his movements careful and deliberate. "We keep them separated because most species react with violence when confronted with a Vresh, regardless of age. Our cubs have been attacked before, during first contacts with other civilizations. We learn to keep them hidden, protected, away from those who would harm them out of instinct or fear." One of the cubs stirred on Marcus's chest, making a small mewling sound before settling again. Its tiny claws flexed, catching slightly in his uniform fabric. "When we discovered they were missing," Krelenik continued, his voice softer now, "we feared the worst. We searched the Vresh sections first, then began emergency protocols. We thought perhaps they'd wandered into a dangerous area, or that some species had. He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Instead, one of the security personnel spoke up, her voice carrying a note of disbelief. "We find them sleeping peacefully on a human. As if they've found a littermate." Marcus felt the weight of the moment settling on him heavier than the physical weight of the cubs. "I meant no disrespect, Ambassador. They seemed scared. I couldn't leave them alone like that." Krelnak made a sound that the translator couldn't quite process, something between a laugh and a growl. "No disrespect. Human, do you understand what this means? My children, the offspring of a Vresh ambassador, chose to sleep on you. They felt safe with you. Do you comprehend how unprecedented this is?" "I'm beginning to get an idea," Marcus admitted. The ambassador moved closer still, until he was standing directly beside the desk. His massive hand reached out, and Marcus tensed, but Krelnak only gently stroked the head of one sleeping cub. In Vresh culture, there is an old saying, the measure of a being is not in their strength, but in their mercy toward those weaker than themselves. He looked at Marcus with those predatory yellow eyes, but now there was something else there, respect, perhaps. Maybe even the beginning of friendship. "The galaxy fears humans for many reasons," Krelnak said quietly. "Your adaptability, your stubbornness, your refusal to submit even when logic dictates you should. But perhaps they should also fear you for this, your ability to show kindness where others would show only violence. To protect rather than destroy, even when facing the young of a species that could easily kill you." "They're just kids," Marcus said simply. "Yes," Krelnak agreed. "They are. And you treated them as such, rather than as threats or monsters." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "I believe, Captain Webb, that this is the beginning of a much deeper alliance between our peoples." The cubs continued to sleep peacefully, unaware of the profound moment unfolding around them, content in the warmth and safety of their unexpected guardian.